The first ones, the Void Lords, the Eredar, the Shadow Moon clan, and a grand theory to bind them all in the dark. Hello, it's the Lore Freak here. I have been making Warcraft lore speculations on my blog since 2019, and today I would like to share a grand theory constructed by me along with my fellow lore council members from Turkey, Arnat and Isorelax. We have been doing lore streams for more than a year, and we have some solid speculations coming through before. We will start our theory with a question. What if first ones are the Void Lords, who have been banished into the inescapable void by their own creations, the Eternal Ones, and adapted into the dimension in time by becoming its lords? Without further ado, I present you. First, I have to point out this. The theory is almost 2 months old and it received incredible feedback on Reddit, which you can check out it in the description below. So it may or may not fit with recent lore revelations, but we will talk about the recent level reveals in later videos and develop this theory further through them. So, the jailer actually being the original arbiter idea, which I have also pointed out back in December, is the core of our theory. Why there is still secrets, Kortia in the in-between, inhabited by the attendants you see in Oribos? Why the first ones do not even attempt to stop what Zuval and Sylvana set in motion if the system they built is about to be destroyed? Because they have been betrayed, trapped and transformed into creatures of entropy. Zuval was the original champion and the arbiter of the first ones, standing in the crossroads of souls and directing the souls to their own chosen place, respecting their past, mortal experiences and most importantly, free will. Unlike what Arbiter has been programmed to do for ages. Remember what Sire Denatrius has said about the jailer back in the beginning of the expansion.
Every precious drop of anima, so painstakingly wrung from the tortured souls of lesser beings, now paves the path for the banished one to reclaim what was his.
To reclaim what was his. Yes. Kortia and the Maw were the original or crossroads of souls and were working just like the first ones have intended, until the other eternal ones became greedy for more power, more anima. They have banished the first ones and trapped Zuval inside the Maw, rendering it inescapable using the heart of the forest and made Zuval its jailer. How would the Eternal Ones banish their creators? Well, if the creation overthrows its creator, is a common use term throughout games or mythologies such as StarCraft or Greek mythology. So, the Eternal Ones have empowered themselves with anima enough to banish Zuval and the first ones, both. So, we believe the first ones have not perished like other pool souls, but instead adapted to survive and transformed into Void Lords. This can be the reason why the supposed Lords of the Void cannot directly access our physical reality, and also, across all cosmological forces, why the Void has this immense knowledge and claim in the cosmic war. N'Zoth and Azshara have something to say about that and Zoval.
Treacherous Banshee, do you think I am blind to the darkness you seek to unleash?
You see, Ashara and her master were pretty much aware of what is to come. But what if Zovaal and N'Zoth share the same goal, but only with different approaches? As N'Zoth finds Zovaal's methods pretty aggressive, unlike him. He and the other old gods have been corrupting or manipulating Azeroth's Word Soul for untold millennia, and Zovaal's aggressive approaches will break their own efforts. Zovaal also wants to claim the Word Soul, but he never said that he wants to kill or destroy the Word Soul. He wants to claim the Word Soul so he can open a direct path into the void to free his masters. Well, I have been pointing out for 2 years there are undeniable links connecting Death and Void. Every content creator relies on one single line from Three Sisters comic to claim Death and Void as two cosmic forces are mortal enemies. But I can convince you they have direct ties using the Shadowmoon clan back in Warlords of Draenor. The second you enter the dungeon Shadowmoon Burial Grounds, you will hear these lines.
You wade to a river of souls, stranger. It is best to turn back. This was once a place of peace, a place for eternal rest. An eternity in darkness cannot escape.
Sounds like the move, aren't them? An eternity in darkness, a place inescapable.
Rivers of the damned, rise! Rise in the name of darkness! Rise in the name of Ner'zhul! The Shadow Moon beckons!
Come, strangers, cross into the realm of the Shadowlands. I shall deliver you to your death.
And during the second boss fight, Nalish, the Void manifested boss, has some interesting lines as well.
Your undying souls will fuel my ascension from the darkness.
You see, the Shadowmoon clan was pretty much aware that Death and Void can be harnessed together. So, unlike most of the community claims, you cannot kill the Void with powers of Death. That is not the antidote of the Void. Furthermore, during the introduction questline of Shadowlands, when we are trying to save Bane from the effects of a curse, Troll says that the magic of the mauve reminds him of the Shadowmoon clan. Even as Bane's flesh melts, his spirit draws closer to death. I have seen dark magic like this before among the Shadowmoon clan. The jailer's minions must have inflicted a similar malady upon Bane. The magic of the Shadowmoon clan was empowered by the Void, most importantly by a Dark Nauru, which has nothing to do with death, right? The Nauru.
You are just maggots swarming to the corpse of a dying god.
What if, when they adapted to the dimension of the Void, the first ones have created the Nauru and sent them into the physical realm to infiltrate mortals and set them into the path of light. Through them, they would have some control over the mortal races. Remember Muru from Samwell back in TBC, which had transformed to a being called Anthropus, a Void God, which in our theory a direct way for Void Lords to access our reality. As the Nauru depletes its holy energy, it eventually transforms into Void Gods, not Void Lords, and provide a direct gateway for the first ones. There are other examples for a Nauru transforming into a Void God. Some had outer push, but some were by themselves, and that would explain the extremely aggressive behavior of Zira against Illidan or Kara in alternate tenor, which dominated the entire Draenei and turned them into Lightbound fanatics. This extreme aggression of a being of light seemed like it was trying to spend its energy as soon as possible so it could transform a Void God, and ultimately provide a direct gateway for the Void Lords, aka the first ones. While talking about Naru, did you know the Eredar race that they have met and separated 1/3 of as the Draenei have been using an interesting technology that can be named as soul magic, which later on has been prohibited by the Naru. The reason was simple. Using souls or anima as a source of power is the biggest crime you can commit against the Order of Shadowlands, because you simply deny anima from the machine of death for your own ends. For more information about it, you can check out Baylor's video from the last year, as he explains in detail how the culture of Eredar and the soul usage have been connected. But to summarize, the Eredar had the habit of putting their ancestors' souls into mechanisms called vigilance, and they have used the same technique later on to power their soul engines for the Legion. Akindon in both universes is the greatest example for this technique. Talking about the Eredar, we must also point out the first warlock ever, Archimonde the Defiler. Through his spell kit, we know soul magic, death magic and fel magic are all directly linked with each other, as he could use all three at the same time. After the Eredar has joined the Legion, they improved their technology by constructing 4 soul forges and soul engines. If the Eredar knew this much about the Shadowlands, both Archimonde and Kil'jaeden would know they would be condemned to an eternity of punishment in the Maw. So, both for their own sake and their entire race, they saved Sargeras' offer as an obvious way to prevent that from happening. By becoming demons, they would instead tie their souls to the twisted nether. By preventing the Draenei to further usage of soul magic, the first ones, through the Naru, would ensure Draenei souls to properly journey to the afterlife, where they belong in their design, and would not deny anima from the Shadowlands. Unlike another race which involuntarily denied their mortal souls and anima from the Shadowlands, the Night Elves. As a racial trait, disembodied spirits of the Night Elves would turn into wisps upon death, so while their physical body would perish, their souls would remain on the mortal realm, kept its existence and used its power to help the remaining Night Elves. So, through this racial trait, the Night Elven race have been denying anima from the Shadowlands for untold time. And I am sorry for being that guy, but this could be very well the second reason why Sylvanas burnt down Teldrassil. First, to break the hope of the Night Elves, of course, but more importantly, to send the countless imps inhabited Teldrassil into the Maw. For more detailed explanation for this theory, you can check out my article back in 2020 in the description below. So, let's continue to examine the practices of the Eredar and the Burning Legion. We also know the Legion was using necromancy too. There are several major Legion acts involving necromancy, but one in particular was Kael'thas himself back in the Burning Crusade. After being killed in the Tempest Keep, Kael'thas' corpse was raised back from the dead by a Shivara with the command of Kil'jaeden. It was also Kil'jaeden who had plotted the formed Scourge and the Lich King, using weapons and armor crafted right at the Maw. So he definitely had immense knowledge and awareness about Shadowlands and necromancy. I have talked a lot about the direct ties between the Legion, Kil'jaeden, Zovaal and the Shadowlands back in 2020. The links for articles will also be in the description below. As a final note, there is no solid evidence about Archimonde being truly dead. However, our final confrontation with him took place inside the Nether. Even if the mythic phase was canon, he still gave his last breath on Altanet Draenor. So in the physical realm, not in the Nether. Is that not enough? So enjoy watching how Dave Koshak was struggling to answer that particular question about Archimonde during the Q&A back in BlizzCon 2015.
I can tell you our idea behind that. We might change it. This might not be canon. This might be something that we decide we're going to tinker with, right? So I'll give you. I'll try and explain what the thinking was. The idea was that the demons in the Burning Legion, they're kind of immortal in that they can exist across all the planes unless they're killed in the actual Twisting Nether itself. So killing Archimonde at the World Tree in Warcraft 3, well, you know, he was killed on Azeroth, but he would recoalesce in the Twisting Nether and come back to haunt us again. And the idea was, if you played in Mythic and you defeated Archimonde, you actually defeated him in the Nether, and then he'd be dead for good. That was the idea that we played with. We tried to explain that, and I don't know. It certainly doesn't come across in game because it's not necessarily explained in game, and maybe we'll change that. Maybe we'll change the canon of that. But that was the idea that we were working with. Was unless you rip these demons out and take them to the Twisting Nether and kill them there, they'll always keep coming back. So, but maybe that's not canon. Maybe we'll.
Well, I guess it's time for a conclusion. Considering everything we have been pointing out and mentioning here, we can now vaguely see a certain bigger picture about the real intent and current state of the Shadowlands. It was a dimension of reality inside the Warcraft universe, defining the cosmic power of death, originating from the once untamed power of the Souls, Anima. We think the mysterious First Ones created a realm of reality to harness and use this power, so the soul energies of the mortals would not waste away and instead be used to keep this machine of death going. So the mortal beings and their life's experiences would be protected from vanishing into non-existence. For the original design of the First Ones to work, they had created powerful beings from Anima itself. These embodiments of Anima are the Eternal Ones as we know today. Celestia was the firstborn. Celestia was the firstborn. She was created to be a watcher, and she would decide if mortal souls were ready to enter Shadowlands, and she would lead their way to the Shadowlands, so their existence would not perish in the great unknown. The Winter Queen was created to keep wild souls and the cycle of life connected to it in check. She would guard and guide the beings that were manifesting the natural order of the mortal life into death and life again, so the basis of mortal life that would create the mortal souls would be protected. Primus was the constructor. The First Ones have manifested him to help them to create the realms and machinations of Shadowlands, including the weapons, armors and defensive structure of Shadowlands to keep other cosmic powers and possible invaders at bay. The Nautilus was created as the original jailer and the punisher of evil mortal souls. He would cleanse them of their sins and give them a chance to be useful in afterlife. Finally, Zovaal was created to be champion of death and the most wise. He was the ultimate guide of the mortal souls, with the artifact that has been placed on his chest by the First Ones. He would attract all the normally dispersed mortal souls to himself and then guide them into their afterlives according to their life's experience, choices and free will. But at some point, some of the Eternal Ones got greedy, led by the Primus himself. They rebelled against the order First Ones have put in place, and they have overthrown their champion and broke the system to enforce their own. By perishing countless mortal souls, they empowered themselves. By stealing their existence and abusing needless amounts of anima, they could at last stood against the First Ones and Zovaal. In the end, they have managed to defeat them. With their newfound power, they have banished the First Ones into the inescapable void and closed the way back with keys formed from their very beings. They destroyed the one central realm of Shadowlands into two and threw one part into the midst of the in-between with the knowledge and remains of the First Ones, so it would not be questioned or later learned. They have sunk the other part and made it the move, and imprisoned Zovaal, their brother and once leader, there to be forevermore its jailer. The triumphant Eternal Ones enforced a new order to get most power and advantage of mortal souls and anima. Primus crafted a living machination named Arbiter and formed a Star Hunter. This Arbiter would not have the conscience and wisdom of Zovaal, but instead would order souls according to their level of anima and usefulness, not their memories or past lives. By placing Zovaal's gift given him by the First Ones, this new flow was built. Now every soul would instead be attracted to the Arbiter just to be used like this. Kirestia would lead every possible soul to Shadowlands to be harnessed despite their time and life to be completed. The Winter Queen would not need to respect the cycle of life as long as she could harness the most of the souls from life. And Primus would now be totally free to use necromantic powers to ensure his machinations. Yet, eventually this unjust order will be broken. With the secret help of Uneasy Denatrius and his dreadnought servants, Zovaal managed to reach into every cosmic power and gathered allies, including, in our opinion, the Bionic Legion. Through the use of their help, Zovaal managed to break the purpose of his jailers and broke Arbiter into directing the souls back to him again. Eventually, he plans to gather all the keys and with the help of the most powerful Titan soul, Azeroth, he will open the way back to the void and free the First Ones. But the problem is, while Zovaal was jailed, too much time has passed, and the First Ones that created him may not be the ones he has known anymore. So, if you have watched this far, I appreciate it. I thank you. If you subscribe and drop a like, it would be an incredible motivation for me to keep going on YouTube. We have much to talk in the upcoming days. We will talk about Elune and the veil that covers our eyes. So until next time, remember.
Death was never meant